But yeah, we'll move on to our final and the main event of the weekend. We have England France for all the marbles, for the Autumn Nations Cup honours that have been
half a marble maybe
for a whole half a marble that has been dwindling as far as esteem with each passing week.
It's certainly getting a lot of criticism as a competition, which is a shame.
It's a shame because it's a good idea. If only it could be executed.
Well,
a bit better.
it's not a question of it being like the problem is that people are lashing out at the Autumn Nations Cup as if it's responsible for dead rubber games happening with no crowds in autumn.
Yeah.
Like an ordinary autumn series, like it doesn't have the intrigue of the All Blacks or the Springboks or the Wallabies.
Yes.
It was never going to because of COVID, and so this in its stead is obviously going to feel worse. But like a normal November series is way worse actually than a proper competition.
Yes.
And so I was super encouraged to see the Autumn Nations Cup come in. And now to see that like already Scotland are booking their internationals for next year, and like it's going to be at least another year if we do see a tournament come in autumn instead of the usual friendly matches. But how quickly people forget, like a game between Wales and Argentina next autumn is going to be even more dead rubbery than anything you've seen in this tournament.
Yes,
so
you'll have a checked out Argentina and say actually the Springbok showings as well.
Yeah.
It's a good solution to the problem. Just like have the similar format, bring those teams in. You got some silverware. If you have crowds back, suddenly you have a bit more impetus. Like it also hasn't helped that Fiji haven't played any rugby, but these two teams have played rugby between England and France. We're just regarding the game itself, it is going to be a Sunday game. So it's a 6th of November, 2 p.m. kickoff. That's Greenwich Mean Time.
like any good cup final.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Sunday afternoon
kickoff. Yeah.
Nothing says important game like a 2 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday.
Indeed. Yeah. It's going to be reffed by Andrew Brace and
in Twickenham.
Yeah, in Twickenham, and the weather gods reckon it might be a wet one in Twickenham. It seems there's going to be a bit of rain coming across.
It's to be raining all week in London apparently. Yeah. But listen, it might sort of ease off, and we might get some half decent conditions in Twickenham anyway. It's December. What can we expect here?
Yeah. Just in terms of colour of the game then, like as we were saying, it's the showpiece event of a very often maligned competition, but actually a good idea and should be committed to more so, because people forget just how bad some of those autumn games can be, regardless of
it gets overshadowed by the one brilliant game involving the All Blacks where like Scotland nearly beat them or Ireland nearly beat them or Ireland do beat them that one time. All of those are great games and great moments, and we would never want to do away with that. We would obviously include all the Southern Hemisphere teams and everybody together, but getting a tournament instead of the friendly games, just so we can avoid those dead rubber games between the likes of Wales and Argentina that are played at 0 miles an hour and are won like 20 points to 11 that everybody instantly forgets about.
Indeed,
as soon as they're over. I think it's important to factor that in when you're criticising the tournament. But as far as the final itself is confirmed, we have disappointingly been denied what would have been perhaps a tournament saving game involving France's firsts, on account of the Eleanor, who have shrewdly decided that it is better for the game of rugby that Toulouse have their full strength side for their away game against Bayonne this week.
That's important.
Like
hugely significant game.
Toulouse are playing in Bayonne. Like that's where Antoine Dupont needs to be right now.
Exactly. No, it's so true. Ntamack too. He should be there, even if he's not fit. He'll be in a tracksuit. It's baffling but not surprising.
No, it's just selfish in the extreme and utterly lacking in vision, and it can't be overstated how mind-numbingly regressive the Eleanor can be in terms of the direction they want to take the game in. But as it is, that is where Antoine Dupont will be. He'll be away in Bayonne, so it's an opportunity from a French point of view for their youngsters to make a statement. What a statement it would be against a very imperious and ferocious England
side. You can't really make them favourites at all. They're
make
under
France
favourites.
No, I don't think you can.
You can't really, in good conscience, make their youngsters, who don't tend to travel that well anyway as a history thing, go to Twickenham and do the job over this excellent World Cup final England team.
And from England's point of view, it's obviously just like it's an opportunity to keep on trundling on, like really chalk off. It wouldn't be obviously quite the same as playing the first team, but it would still be, at least on paper, chalking off that loss earlier in the year against France, putting that right, and kicking on, taking your second piece of silverware from the year.
Literally kicking on. I think that there's a new guy, Doolan, in there. He hasn't caught an English kick yet, I think, this year, so He'll be ready this
they
time.
can be maligned for kicking the ball, but they're owning the physical battles.
Yes, they are.
And owning everything at the moment, and to really cement their authority on the game, on the whole game in Europe, to be honest, would be a consequence perhaps of this win for them as well.
Yeah.
It is important to note there's going to be fans.
Yeah,
for the first time.
2000 is it?
2000
fans in Twickenham.
Yes.
Up in the Northern Hemisphere, fans back. That is obviously tremendous news.
Yes, fantastic.
Regardless of only 2,000 in a massive stadium or whatever, they can pretend it's an Edinburgh game.
Yeah,
but
well,
it's
if
like,
nothing else, it's going to encourage the broadcasters to cut the fake crowd noise.
Yes.
To actually hear what's going on the field.
God, I'm so sick to death of fake crowd noise.
It's amazing to hear how bad it is as well. How badly it's done. You just hear random like
well, it was during the minute silence for Dominici.
That's right.
Yeah,
it was the Irish broadcaster that was broadcasting it, and they had during the minute silence they had like pumped in murmurs.
Yeah,
it's like, we're gonna have a fake crowd disrespect the minute silence. It was it was mind blowing.
God
to see that.
Save me, that's bad stuff. So yes, it'll be good to see that thoroughly muted.
Yeah, I wonder,
and maybe a bit of noise.
Is it going to be 2,000 fans or 2,000 Blazers? I don't know.
The answer to that now. But 2,000 people, which is the main thing and the main point, and that is good.
And yeah, listen. Hopefully, this is the beginning of the end for well, it's optimistic to say COVID. You know, we have all this positive vaccine news, but yeah, you know, fingers crossed.
Punters back at games and just a bit of atmosphere at sporting events would be great to see.
I'd take the Lions tour. Like, if we can get things sorted by the Lions tour, that'd be massive.
For sure.
Six Nations might be a bit optimistic.
Yes, indeed. But it is just a great news. It's probably the best news about the whole thing. 2,000 spectators will be in attendance. And then just as far as squads, well, the bulk from England's point of view, the bulk of the English squad kind of picks itself. It depends what changes they want to make. Like, do they go Lawrence or Ford? They opted for Ford, Farrell, Slade against Wales and moved them about, whereas against Ireland with a bit more heft they decided Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence doing a Tuolangi impression. He didn't do a bad one at all.
He's a big strong boy.
I would not be against getting him back in there and putting Farrell back to 10.
Willis, do you want to give him the nod, or do you want to just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? You know, you have Curry Underhill Vunipola
with Ben Earl on the bench. Yeah, it's tough to see Willis getting his way in despite being as good as any of them. You know, Sam Simmons as well is another guy who's been tearing it up in the Premiership.
European Player of the Year.
Yeah, cannot get himself into Test contention. It's a funny one. The England, their squad is by and large settled, pending one or two changes.
Does Harry Williams maybe come in onto the bench?
I would have him in there. Yeah, I don't really know. Will Stewart coming in off the bench has not been massive impact, and Harry Williams is quality. I don't really. It's another one from Eddie Jones' point of view.
Does Ellis Genge retain his spot?
Yeah. Probably,
despite the headbutt.
Yes, in spite of that.
Yeah,
but it's not like you could be replacing him with immaculate discipline if you want Marler in.
That's probably true, but a bit more nous maybe about it. Although he got away with it, so I guess it counts as nous. Yeah. But yeah, no. So yeah, this is the England squad. We don't have it named as of right now, but you can kind of presume that give or take a few tactical decisions, we kind of know what to expect from England. France is the one where things are a little bit shakier. Baptiste Saran and Teddy Thomas both had to depart for top couture, so they won't be in action too. The Eleanor shrewdly depriving us of them as well. I'm
pretty sure Bordeaux's game this week is pretty important. Saran is Toulon, isn't he?
Saran is Toulon.
Yeah, you see, you wouldn't know because they don't even broadcast their games outside of the country. But anyway.
Yeah. Enough of that. We'll get off our soapbox with that one. But Sebastian Bezzi does come in, who is a very, very good scrum half.
Excellent.
He's the understudy to Antoine Dupont, and sometimes plays with him when they move Dupont to 10, which they do at times. Very, very good, very combative, very quick.
Yeah,
so that's encouraging.
I think he's going to be on the bench, but Kulu will be starting. But see him coming into the squad is excellent.
Yes. And then other guys like you have Mathis Lebel, Alvaretti Raka, who we haven't really seen any of, but he's awesome, and we know this from the Clermont
I don't really know why they didn't go with him last week, and I'd love to see him come in at least to the 23 in the absence of Thomas this week.
Yes, you'd think he would. He's a kind of a like-for-like change in terms of dynamic playmaking winger.
And that's it. You know, they're going to need to be dynamic if they want to win this. In hindsight, from a France point of view, it might have made more sense to pick the changed outfit in that opening day dead rubber against Wales, which everyone now forgets.
Yeah.
On the week that was in it. They just fancied picking their first team and spanking Wales, and
credit
to them, they did it.
It made a difference because they did beat Ireland, and that was what they were targeting with that.
I know, but they kicked off like
no one.
They started that game against Wales. Like the point is, like you might have thought they needed a tune-up game, but they were fine in that game against Wales, and they would have been fine if they hadn't done that. I guess it's easy to say.
It's easy to say now. You do want a tune-up game if you're going into the Six Nations, and because Ireland had the Italy game the week before, which they didn't. Yeah. So I understand the justification for going for that. Hindsight's a funny thing. It's 2020,
and now they're in a final and picking their seconds.
Indeed, yeah, but like their seconds are pretty good. So here we go. Let's take England on in Twickenham. We're just going to take a look at both sides and how they want to approach the game, what their winning conditions are for the contest, and we're going to start with the hosts and favourites.
The hostess with the mostest.
It's England, and how do England want to attack this disjointed French team when they have the ball?
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, they have looked absolutely imperious at times with ball in hand against even against Wales. A lot of people found that frustrating, but once they went that 7 points behind, they put together a lovely attacking sequence where we saw that sort of screen shape return off the front foot ball. They had like options out the wazoo, as it were, like where a back has the ball, he can flick it in behind and they can go wide, or he can hit the forward runner. And on a few occasions they opened Wales up by hitting the forward runner. He was just one-on-one with a Welshman, and I think it was Underhill on a couple of occasions, and Curry once, just beating that contact and then instantly having a runner on his outside. And that is when, like, we forget, with all the kicking they've done, England's offence circa 2019 and building up into that World Cup was one of the most polished, modern, sophisticated.
It spread from Mark McCall's Sarries up, and they finally worked those multiple screens, multiple lines running, deception and pace and depth.
And then excellent support play, contact winning and support play off the back of that, with everything done with speed and crisp accuracy in the passing from forwards right through to backs. That at its best is absolutely brilliant. But it does take a couple of things to happen for us to see that. I mean, first of all, obviously, physical battle. England have been brilliant at it so far. France are going to bring heft. Even this young French team, they're going to do their best to bring at least more heft than
Macalou. They're not small. They're just a bit more disjointed.
So England do, and I think the South African final was evidence of this. Like, for them to get it off, they can't be going backwards. They have to be going forwards. And so it does take a couple of hit ups from the likes of a Billy V, from the likes of maybe an Ollie Lawrence if he's in there, for them to get around the corner and really get that humming. And then the other thing that it takes is just for them to put the boot away for a little bit and actually back themselves.
See, this is what I was thinking all while you were saying that. It's like, that's nice, I do remember that, but we're going to kick the ball, of course.
Well, last week, like, it took them going 7 points down to off a charge down kick to dial it in and run the ball, and they did it very effectively. Like, they pretty much chalked off the try instantly, and that was telling, like, from their perspective. But then, like, when the game's in the tight, they go right back to just owning the territory game and trying to impose themselves defensively. They have to be careful. This
French team are arguably the most dangerous opposition in the Northern Hemisphere that you could conceively kick loosely to.
There's no argument about it.
Well, it is. They are. Look, I like Japan, I guess. But
in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay.
But it's like, what are you kicking loosely to France for? Like, we know this is a tale as old as time. You kick the ball aimlessly to them, they're going to punish you on counter-attack. Same with the All Blacks in the Southern Hemisphere. Same even with Wallabies. But
you can ask Ireland about it. Like, in the game against France in the Six Nations decider, like on 2 or 3 occasions, Ireland, just as England have been doing, just kicked the ball, and then they made a play. Like, it was nothing wrong with the Irish kick chase. It was pretty decent, but all of a sudden, I know they don't have their first choice team, but they still have very instinctual, classy footballers.
Dulin at fullback is an excellent counter attacker.
As it was Boutier taking the ball, whipping it around, flicking a pass, and then they ran around the corner, got it instantly to the width, to the left winger Fiku, who it was, and just got outside the Irish kick chase, and then cut them open, and then they had the support runs from Ntamack and Dupont to finish the score. And that's what they're so good at. Like, if you give them the option, they will dial it in and get outside you. So if England think they're just going to kick the ball into the sky and pressure defence, it could backfire. And I would think I would be a lot more comfortable from an England point of view if I saw them sort of go to the basics, go to their contacts, their forwards, back their stellar players to get on top of the French.
A few offloads in the tight, and then suddenly you're over the gain line, and it's a disjointed,
especially in and around halfway. They've been doing too much kicking when they're in the midfield. Like, there's space to be had. They should be confident of dominating against a disjointed French defence.
Yeah,
I think that's what they have to do.
A few dominant phases and one or two offloads, and suddenly they should have the space and the numbers and the techers to execute all of that. And they probably will have too much for France in that offensive area should they go to it. But then when they're defending, it's been much lauded. They put in some very, very dominant displays against some of these Six Nations teams. The test is different against France, and they were cut open in the early exchanges in the Six Nations game. The one that they lost, they were kind of blown away.
It was where Ireland never went, in all of their, whatever ridiculous percent of the time they spent defending. Ireland never ever went wide, and France will, so they're going to have to be wise to that. Play with a bit more width. Just avoid some sluggishness. I mean, we took, obviously last week we were having doing a bit of analysis on Ireland. We were looking at that play, and it was telling that Mako Vunipola was a little slow to get up after making his tackle and get back in the line. Johnny May found himself extremely narrow for no particular good reason. And they're those little moments that Ireland could have and didn't test the English defence.
Or exactly where France will go, and they will look with a disjointed team, same as they did in the first one. They will be looking to try and start fast, gain a lead, and hold on to it. That's been their MO, because they will not. They've backed their fitness against the likes of Italy last week. They won't back their fitness to be a superior one to this England side. So they're probably contingent on taking a good lead and holding it. So just as you say, arriving sluggish or arriving not to the pitch is a recipe for disaster, because you can just
France are quick
scores.
So you got to match speed with speed. And that's the key, getting up off the ground after you make a tackle quickly. If you're Mako Vunipola, getting back into the line quickly, coming flying out of the line as England do, and leaving maybe a little bit of space in behind to chip into, which
daring them to make the play.
Granted, France can do it, and you need Ben Youngs in behind, and you need your back three in behind to be closing off the space as best you can. But absolutely forcing France to kick the ball, giving them nothing to work with in the midfield by getting flying out of the line, and then if France try and work the phases and suck you in, dominating those contacts as well, getting your Atogis in and your Underhills in and your Currys in.
Suddenly you're disrupting their ball, and then suddenly maybe they're the ones kicking loosely to you, and that's much better opportunity to spring your counter.
They have been trying to. They basically made an identity of establishing their physical dominance on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, there were little innovations. They box kick up, and then they have either Curry or Underhill there to kind of target the next ruck. All of that stuff is clever innovation, and they will probably be able to get some of those plays off against, as we said, a disjointed French side. But that's still no reason to kind of deviate too much from the nuts and bolts of what they're doing, and to back themselves on offense. But when they're defending as well, I would make another nod out to either Lawrence or Slade, whoever's in the 13 channel. Now, it's a bigger job this week than it is any other week. Pretty much for England.
No question.
As you say, France are a wide team. The main defensive kind of fulcrum in that pivot point, the pivot point on defense for a team's doing that, is the 13. He needs to make good reads and physical hits behind the gain line. If they do that, they will shut
line
them down.
Speed. I mean, it'll be there on the inside, so you've got to bring it yourself from the 13. You've got to lead that line and just leave Jalibert nothing to work with.
Force Jalibert is a very fine 10 when things are going forward, but he won't. If he sees the line being cut off, he won't probably throw the speculative pass.
And the other thing he won't do is take the contact. So chances are, if you paint him a negative picture, he's just gonna very Frenchly dink. And then the ball, they won't be ready for it, and England will be, and 9 times out of 10 it's going straight to England. And that's the kind of thing that you want to do.
Exert pressure and capitalise on mistakes.
Make Jalibert operate in no time.
And I think that will be enough, and that is pretty much what they're trying to do, is pressure them on defence into making the mistakes that give them the scores that ultimately take the win and the trophy. That's what the game is. Then we'll pivot on to the set piece, which is an interesting battle. Obviously we have the English scrum, which is a bludgeoning force right now. It's a bit of a bruiser. They're big, they're strong, they're heavy, they're quite young. So they're still dynamic, and it's just it's a big job for we have young props. Is it Nettie and Aldegheri will probably be
they're the incumbents anyway, and then Collinger and Antonio were on the bench after. Weenie Antonio is a big hefty tight head.
He's a good scrummager.
Wouldn't mind seeing them bring him into the first team. I understand if they didn't. They obviously didn't have any problems with Italy last week.
No,
who does?
Exactly. Different kettle of fish altogether.
They're likely to have their hands full. I mean, they can all scrummage. They're young French props. They're all going to be aware of the scrum.
The props as well, though. The England are just so hefty as an 8, and France are relatively slight as an 8.
You get low. This is where it comes down. It's a funny old world. Like the heft is important, but if you can get your body position right and your tight head's technique is solid, and you're low and compact, and then you have an 8-man shove. That's a basic thing that you can lock down a scrum. And
I actually think Eddie Jones's Japan were a great advocate for that. In the PNC, they were up against bigger teams every single time, but they were very compact, very low, and they dominated.
So just from a technique point of view, France are going to have to be sharp because obviously
alive to the danger that England will scrum for penalties, and France know about scrumming for penalties. None of those props are strangers to it. They need to be alert to it.
More than that, they have been pretty consistently launching very effectively off set piece, and that carried through last week to this second string side with Villiers getting a lovely try off set piece as well. They're trying to punch holes off set piece, so it's vital that they're not disrupted. And it's going to be tough for them at scrum time. It's going to be tough for them at line out time as well with Maro Itoje.
I think
the absolute
avoiding mauls is probably a good call for them.
But just even securing the ball.
Mauls. They're obviously less drilled because they're a newer team and they've just had a hit out against Italy pretty much to get them primed for this. Like, they're not going to be as well drilled or well organised when they're just a hodgepodge pack. But what they can do is get clean ball off the top and maybe move the English pack around. That's obviously a more prudent thing to do because Itoje is just an assassin.
I think they will.
At maul time, he will kill you.
Getting if they can manage to between the guys, the second rows and the hooker and the line out calling. If they can just secure the ball. I mean, they do have in actually in 6 and 7 in Woki and Makalu, if they stick with the same lads who played last week, very athletic line out options, which is a wise and good thing to have in the team against this England team. So mixing up the calls and
that is another kind of parallel between their first and their seconds, because they do all of their back row in their first team are line out options.
And Aldred,
and where their second rows are kind of hybrid guys who aren't necessarily the best aerial forwards, but their back row all share that job, and that has carried through. There's been a lot of what is good about this second string side is that the macro seems to be the same picture. They're kind of marching to the same beat as the first team, even if the personnel are different. That's probably been the main point of encouragement from this whole thing. But there's no sense reinventing the wheel, and there's no sense going down a blind alley. Itoje's in mauls. You better not be mauling.
No, and even more so, just securing the ball will be vital, and that involves obviously usually calling it to a guy who isn't standing next to Itoje.
That's a good one. But having a legit option at 2, 4 and 6.
Getting up in front. Like if Johnny Hill is there next to you, getting up ahead of him. I'd like to, Makalu would be a guy who could really bail them out because he gets up quickly.
He does. He's very, very dynamic. Good spring on him.
Up and out, and the ball's away.
It's how you get around this bigger, stronger pack by being a bit quicker and sharper. It has to be that way, and moving the point of contact.
Yeah, and that's a decent pivot point to look broadly on France in terms of what they're trying to do and in terms of winning the game. From an offensive point of view, they looked a bit disjointed against Italy to start with,
but then they started to look jointed by the end, which is good. Like points of optimism. Like as we said, they're marching to the same tune as the main team. So we know they're going to be wanting to flood wide channels, flood narrow spaces with a lot of numbers. They're going to want to do so quickly, and they're basically broadly going to want to move them around and capitalise on kick return. They do. To a man, it was encouraging to see from their seconds as well, because their first do it so well. They switch on when it's a loose kick to them. They all seem to understand. And we'll peel this way and go. And it's like that is vital to their chances here if they can, because England will kick to them, as we know. We've seen all the evidence this autumn is to suggest there will be opportunity off kick return.
Kick return is almost your primary area.
I think it is their primary offensive thing. Like they do strike off set piece as well, but it'll be less likely to puncture an English defence off first phase straight away. Like, it just wouldn't tend to happen that way. But off kick return, off a loose chase, they can. So like, that's where they will want to back themselves. It starts with putting them the pressure on and receiving the ball, but yeah, all of them being sharp and quick on the tempo is vital for France.
Yeah, and the tempo is not just vital on the kick return. Like like when Scotland have run up massive scores against England, which they've done twice, there's been a combination of some and lots of Finn Russell magic, but also just causing England real concern by moving the ball really quickly. And it's one thing that, like, Eddie Jones's England, as good as they have been, they're very, very slow to adjust when things go not their way.
Yes.
So yeah, mixing it up between like sort of sharp lines with crisp passing a la Finn Russell, and then just going wide, isolating the weaknesses and getting the likes of Villiers into holes, and then being clinical. I mean, it's one thing we can back France to do in most instances is be clinical and finish line breaks with good support running. And that's obviously a key as well. But punching holes and being quick in everything that you do, and not allowing, like, if England are slow to get up after a tackle, punishing them for that, moving it around, getting it out, keeping it as far away from their magnificent back row forwards as possible.
Yes, make the game not about them. It's the key to success, because as soon as it becomes about them, or if it slows down a little, it's
all
nigh on impossible to stop this England team if you're playing into their hands. So you need to mix it up. And then things like the kicking game as well, like, they need to be functional kicks, they need to be good kicks when they go to it. But I wouldn't get involved in a kicking duel with this England team as well, because similar to playing your forwards you're playing them at their game, and as Ireland can attest to, they're better at it than you, so don't try to beat them at it. Obviously you'll need to go to some kicks sometimes.
Well, whereas most important is on exit. I mean, I remember like the real sort of almost game changing moment that came in the game earlier in the year that France won was when Boutier managed to make a kick from his own goal line all the way down to the 5 up the other end. They don't have Boutier, which is a shame, but getting like pure connections on long kicks and playing for distance and grass against England, because one thing that has been true about England every single time this year is once they have the ball in their own half in virtually any context, they're kicking you the ball. So when you're in your own half, just get it to their half, because all they're going to do with that ball is turn around and kick it up to you, and that's pretty much what you want.
It's your primary attacking ball.
So I don't know if it's going to be Dulin or whoever it is who's going to step up.
Jalibert will have to as well.
But trying to get your pure spirals and get length out of the exit kick is going to be vital, because the last thing that you need is a sort of a wimpy box kick that goes out just beyond the 22, and all of a sudden they're setting up an attacking line out.
That's exactly
that is
what they
much
want.
worse than just kicking it deep, even if the English fullback Elliot Daly is going to have a bit of space to run into. The way they've been playing this year is they've just been kicking those balls.
Yeah, it's true.
So getting those long, deep kicks off exit.
A bit more shrewdness and a bit of nous in the kicking thing. And then similarly, just as far as the kicking thing, the drop goal that Jalibert kicked was a very encouraging one as well, because it was well executed for one, a good strike, but it was also well timed. It was the right option at the right time, because the attack had stalled and he recognised it. He sat deep and he kicked quickly.
It goes back to the point that I was making about Italy when I was talking about them kicking threes. Obviously, like with France, it's even more so. Like England's goal line defence is very, very good, and things are going to tighten up. They're going to bring an all-out blitz, because you haven't got as much space to work with wide or in behind. They have less space to defend, so they can be more ruthless in terms of their blitzing, and then all of a sudden all I have to do is catch you once, and then Underhill's in, and then the ball's gone.
I think I agree. I think
kick drop goals
from this point. Once you're in the 22, if you've made a line break and it's fallen short and you're 2 or 3 phases deep, then sit deep and take the 3-pointer if you're not under penalty advantage. Because again, it's England's strength, it's not yours. The multi-phase attack of France isn't necessarily the best, whereas
France are more likely to score off a scrum on halfway than they are if they get 5 phases
or a kick return or a turnover
from
60 metres out is probably easier for this France team to convert, rather than 20 phases on the hammering on the English line. So having a 10 there who's confident with his drop goal, but also has the recognition to try and just slot in and take them.
Jalibert needs to take control. This needs to be the day of Jalibert. He needs to, like, if France are going to win this game, it's going to involve a really classy showing from that young man. And it's a day for him to step up, and that involves taking control of it and taking drop goals when they're there, and calling for it, being in charge of that offense. I know French 10s sometimes don't do it.
But we saw with
he's the more experienced
took control of the Irish game and had a very assured, very coming of agey kind of performance for a man, and it would be nice to see Jalibert do something similar, because it's just there are sprigs of optimism.
And likewise, Louis Carbonell as well, who's in the squad.
Carbonell
he's
as well,
serious prospect, and off the bench, if it comes down to it, him closing
he
out
could
the
be
game,
he could be clutch dropped all the time. Yeah, for sure. But just having that weapon in your arsenal, just as a way of exerting scoreboard pressure on the English, and just making sure that your forays into their territory do count for something, do amount to something, because it'll be important for France for 100%. Sure. And then defensively, like it's a big job. It's literally a big job. It's a very elite, very dynamic, very powerful offense that'll be running at them, and they're a little disjointed and a little fragmented.
Well, we saw against Wales how tough it is to rein in when you're not winning any contacts.
Yeah,
and like as well as Biggar can play, and as well as Alan Wynne-Jones can play. Like when they are running that screen shape, and when they first get some go forward ball and then get around the corner and run that screen shape, and then their options are between whipping it wide, and then if you bite in on that, they're just going to give it to the short runner, and he's going to have like one defender to beat who's actually a little off balance himself when they're at tempo. And usually what happens is they're just going to bust through, and even if they don't bust through, they'll bust half through. There'll be a man on his shoulder who'll run straight through you. It was brutal watching them do that to Wales, and you couldn't expect anything else if they keep running that tempo against France. And like, it's easy to say, you know, do XYZ to stop it. I've never seen anybody stop it. Like, the only time it's been like really thoroughly dismantled as an offense is when the Springboks played them, and like there was raw power involved in that. There was Peter Steph
We've seen it get fragmented with this. Yeah, the Springboks, both in the World Cup final and the second half of the first, like that 3-test tour that Razzie had as his first one. We've seen them go absent. We've seen when like if France can start, it starts with the offense, because Scotland did it as well to them. They like if they concede a couple of tries and suddenly it's not going well, and they've got a prescribed plan to kick the ball, do X, Y, and Z. They are not the best team at adjusting on the fly. In fact, it normally takes them to the end of the half of stuttering and thing before they get a bit of messaging on. And
that was change. Sort of what I was trying to say. I probably misspoke a little. Was like saying I've never seen it stopped when it's in rhythm. And in terms of disrupting the rhythm, then that's how you go about that is important. And I think a lot of it is game management. A lot of it is like forcing them to play in the wrong areas of the field. If you give them clean line out ball in your own half, you're going to find it very, very difficult to stop them. We know this. But the key to doing it obviously is to chop tackles and
if you like your Macalou or something, a big line out steal here or there could be very telling, because that was a big part of the Springbok success, taking set piece away from them. All of that would could just take one or two big tackles, big turnover inducing tackles to try and stifle the English offense and also bolster your confidence. It's got to
be sort of like chop and jackal.
Chop and jackal.
That's your mantra. You're not the Springboks. You're not going to be able to Eben Etzebeth, an Englishman, and haul him backwards. Never going to happen. Not with this young French team. So you've got to get in low and just limit their yards after the contact and do your best to slow it down such that they never get that sort of beyond the gain line quick ball tempo that they like. But it's going to be hard to stop them, and it is going to involve a game management to prevent them having that many opportunities. What I will say is there's some encouragement you can take if they are bloody minded and stubborn, and Eddie Jones is like, nah mate, I figured out rugby, you just kick it all the time. That's rugby, and that's a real game of rugby. I finally figured it out. It's just kick the ball always. And like we saw early game against Wales, when they weren't even looking to try and move the ball, they were just trying to kick the ball. And then Dan Biggar was like, alright, I know exactly, I don't even need to worry about a pass or about a step. You're going to kick it off your foot here, Slade, who it was, Henry Slade, and he just blocked it. And like France should be looking for that. If England are going to play like that, blocked kicks, that kind of thing.
Absolute charge down tries. Great. Yeah, that's another thing.
It was such a positive picture to see Wales do for that, but then such an intimidating one for England to come back and score an awesome try themselves.
Yes. Well, it feels like it is a gimmicky thing when they're just like once they're behind. Oh right, well now we'll play a bit of rugby, and so it's like it's a curious one.
But it was interesting to see though that like from last week, like in times gone by, England have been disrupted, and as you say, it's taken them till half time to adjust. That instant response that they did against Wales
was a good adjustment,
was
sign of progress. And as you say, this English. It's such an intimidating prospect for this French team. Obviously they'll need all of the 50-50s and a few more big moments to go their way.
They also need to be good under the high ball. Some of the England kicks are drop deep and bomb.
Big pressure.
Like Doolan, he's going to be under pressure.
He's diminutive as a fullback. He's pretty small, so like as good as he is in the air, he'll be under pressure.
Like a well-timed kick where he has to do it in heavy traffic with a bunch of Englishmen
or
around
Johnny
him.
May competing with him.
He's got to win those battles. If he doesn't, it's going to be curtains.
Yeah, no. To be honest, I think it's a very much an uphill battle, and France are in a position where they will need the breaks. They'll need a few England bailing them out with inaccuracies, as well as a few rubs of the green from the referee. They'll kind of need a collection of all of those things and some heroic showings from some of their own men if they are to get a win here. But I think it unlikely. And speaking of, I suppose we will predictions for the game. I'm leaning towards quite a comfortable, but not that score heavy England win. Probably around a 12.
Similar to what they've been doing.
Similar to what they've been doing. Just comfortably the better team, but not actually reflecting it on the scoreboard.
It's hard to know. I mean, I would... If it was in Paris, I'd be a little more bullish about the French ability to disrupt things and find tries, as we've been talking about.
But they're bad away from home, and they're especially bad at Twickenham.
Yes. Even though it's a bunch of young guys, some things do carry over, and the Twickenham factor and dynamic is... Also, England just play better in Twickenham.
England do play better in Twickenham. That's always a fact. When a lot of teams are like, oh, we always lose in Twickenham, and I'm like, yeah, but you're Romania, you know? That kind
France aren't quite Romania, but they are up against it. And just the Twickenham factor, England are so good. They're purring, they're too physical, and I don't know what to expect. I'm kind of baffled at the amount they're kicking the ball. It could work, they could put Doolan under pressure, and that could be the picture. But what I suspect, I saw enough nuggets of it in the Welsh game that we might actually get to see some of that lethal English offense.
That'd be
nice
nice. Nice to see. For the tournament's sake, I hope you're right.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna be a hopeless optimist and predict a high scoring game, as I did in games, like in many games that have proved to be, dog
you're
fights.
saying like 31-29 to England?
No, I was
going to
say like 35-20.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would be. I'd take that.
Yeah,
take that. France probably wouldn't, but
no, but that's what I'll say.
Okay, yeah, we'll leave it at that then.
All right. Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.